Non, vous avez raison. Bonsoir, bonsoir, Madame la Ministre. Heureusement que vous me rappelez.
So good evening, Minister. So good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for being here with us this evening. I think you've spent most of your day fighting for gender equality in companies. This morning you announced a list of the companies, the 120 biggest French companies, according to their results, for better gender equality and equality in their company. This is very ambitious. It's a sort of list that mixes many different criteria. I didn't actually know about it up until now. Could you please explain to us which criteria you chose and why you carried out this project? Well, hello to everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you in Deauville. I know it's quite a heavy day, actually quite a heavy week, because we decided to make this week the week of gender equality at work. It's something we sort of made up, of course. It doesn't fit a specific date or anything, but we thought that the best way of attracting people's attention to persistent inequality and lack of parity, lack of gender equality, and the best way of sorting out this inequality was to actually concentrate the media attention onto this, and also concentrate company attention onto this, whatever their size, wherever they may be set, and get all of these people, all of these players together for a week. And this week would include talking about the company in major groups, small and medium-sized companies, in the public arena also, and because there's quite a lot to say about that. So we were going to talk about mixing or equality at work, the glass ceiling, and all sorts of other issues. So let's come back to this list of companies. This list was there really to point the finger at this glass ceiling. You all know it. It's something that we find everywhere in all different areas. And this is something we're trying to fight against in different ways. So first of all, we've tried to do this with laws. They imposed that boards actually include as many as 40% women by 2017. This is the regulation in France. So big companies have to actually stick to this law, and actually it's a very good one. But the law does not actually cover other major sectors or executive areas of companies. So, for example, managers, directors, executive committee, the remuneration committees, and all of these different other committees. And all of these committees or areas in the company, we looked at to see whether we could actually set a law on them, but we couldn't because they don't have any. There was no way of doing this. Each company wishes or sets its own system up, so it's difficult to actually apply a law to this as we do through company boards. So rather than having these coercive laws, we tried to work on the image and the reputation, or the image and the brand image of the company by publishing once a year the list of 100 companies in France, listed not according to their size or their wealth, but according to the number of women in the management positions and the efforts that they actually make in this field. So we understood in the management teams, the board members, among the board members, the executive committees, the remuneration committee, and we looked at this, and we also looked at the top 100 in the company. So among the top managers, how many women and how many men were in the company. And so we did this. Well, it's not the government that does this, otherwise it would be partial. So we asked Ectican boards to actually help us do this research, this listing. They carried out this listing based on the various criteria I've just mentioned, and they ended up with a picture in which the first top of the list were announced this morning. So just to list them in the order of from 1 to 5, going upwards, just to carry on with the suspense. So we have Publicis in position number 5, Virbac number 4, Saint-Gobain number 3, Medica number 2, and Orange number 1. So I think there are quite a few representatives of the company in this room. So what was wonderful in this list was that you could see companies of different sizes mingling. I think Medicare was saying this morning that usually in the SPF 120 list, they're usually down the bottom because of the size of the company. And so it was wonderful for them to be so far up in the listing. But they're among these first five because they have a virtuous cycle. They have they set the example. They really put a great deal of energy in sorting out these inequalities. So how do they do it? That was really the interest in what we were talking about this morning. We wanted to show these examples and practices and show all of the companies how these companies did this and how they develop policies with figures to achieve, where they commit to by 2016 or 2017 to meet a certain level in certain areas. Also policies between private and personal life. It's these difficulties that leave or have deleterious or negative effects on the women and prevent them from reaching these positions. Policies to help with these women going into leadership, a development of networks for women within these companies. This actually motivates and really supports women in these areas of responsibility. And then to finish off, to not speak for too long, I would like to mention something very essential. Most of these very highly listed companies have actually decided to remunerate their management with part of their remuneration linked to whether or not they've been able to include a lot of women or not. So taking this into account in the rating and the remuneration of a manager seems to me a very good way of getting things to move along. So that's what the list was for, and I really think that we have achieved on things, and they've really met their target. The companies right at the top really want to stay up there next year. I think that's true, isn't it? And the ones that are slightly low are going to try and steal a place, and that's what the list is for. So thank you. As you were saying, so it was possible to set up a law for quota for the board of companies, but it's not actually possible to do so for the internal structure of the company, especially the executive committees. But you can see that actually the rate is 29% on the top 40 boards of the top 40 companies, but we're on 8-10% for the executive committee members, as in women, 8-10%. So, of course, this listing will be very good for this. But do you also think that the government can play another role? I think you've asked companies to sign a charter, encouraging them to be to work on this more. So maybe in terms of training or education, maybe there are a whole lot of other areas that mean that there are fewer women right at the top of the companies, and that, of course, professional life is far more difficult for them rather than men in general. Well, absolutely, and this is why, of course, it's quite a wide work program. It's very interesting, and there are a lot of things to do. I think that public authorities have to really show their interest in these topics. It may seem simplistic to say so, but it's not always been the case. Often public authorities themselves have been responsible for pushing this issue of equality away and social responsibility, and not actually dealing with it. So how are they present? Well, they're present through the law, through the rules set. There have been laws around for tens of years on equality at work. They haven't been applied, though. They haven't been applied because they've been tolerant. The government's been tolerant on their application. So we need to ensure that when the law says companies of over 50 employees have to adopt reports to compare inequality and gender equality, and then they have to sort out actions to resolve these inequalities. When companies don't actually do this, I'm afraid we really do have to penalise them, and that's what we've changed since we've been in power. And I think a year ago I was in Deauville. I was actually talking, and I was telling you what our objectives were. And 1 year later, I can tell you that we've actually set up the necessary controls, and the penalties are falling. When the companies actually hesitate or don't implement the law, we have 400 companies that were actually we took a legal action against them. Some of these companies were actually penalised, were actually asked for several thousand euros fine, and they have this fine every month until they actually set things right from a professional point of view and a legal point of view. So if we don't actually implement or make this law effective, then we actually make it lose its power, and we make the principle of equality lose power. It loses its power. So that's what we need to do. We need to implement the actual, or make sure they're applied, these laws. But penalties are not sufficient. There are many things that have to go through incentives, through helping, also through aid, and more specifically for everything to do with the smaller size companies, because even if there are more than 50 employees, when there are 55 employees, it's always more difficult and complicated to spend time and human resources on coming up with these diagnosis reports than if you're in a company with 10,000 people. We know this, and so we've developed a series of tools to accompany companies in this diagnosis and this implementation of equality. And of course, the incentive for major groups, that major groups have to show the example, doesn't just go through this list I mentioned earlier on, but through these agreements that my ministry has been signing for the past few months regularly with various companies, big companies. We signed 16 last April, 11 this morning. So what are these companies actually agreeing to in these contracts? Well, to encourage more women in the management teams. And we talked about this earlier on. I'm not going to come back to it. They have quite ambitious targets and figures. For example, Accor has committed to 40% of women in its management committee between now and 2017, which isn't a bad thing at all. But they're also committing to helping along small and medium-sized companies and the supplying companies in implementing gender equality within their structures. So making the most of this very close link that they have with these small and medium-sized companies in order to draw along or drag them along with them in this positive flow to encourage this gender equality by making available to them tools that they will have themselves developed, financed, brought together, trained people up for, so they may even put competencies and skills available and help small and medium-sized companies come up with gender equality, identify candidatures of women who in these very male-dominant areas, because it exists, of course, in the industrial sector, this type of environment. So it's this whole series of measures that makes our policy slightly coercive, because you need it, but also very incentive and very helpful or aidful. So incentives, we know that these type of measures are more efficient than slightly more hiccupy ones, but for companies, this means, well, you were saying encouraging or giving incentives to encourage small and medium-sized companies to have more gender equality. It could be also for the government to encourage buyers, in these bids, encourage companies to have more clauses for gender equality. The first encouragement is no contract if there is not enough gender equality. Maybe there's another way of doing this, and in our era, it's not maybe something that we want to talk about. And that's the tax incentive. There's a recent report of the BCG that shows that if the companies of the Boston Consulting Group, if the companies were more mixed, there was more equality, and they had perfect equality, we would have 0.4% growth, extra growth nationally. I don't know how they work this out, but if there is an increased wealth or richness within the government, there could be an incentive, a tax incentive, to make sure that this is even more efficient and make sure that everyone actually comes to some positive result from this. Well, I wouldn't actually be totally for that type of tax incentive to encourage companies to abide by these legal systems. Well, we're talking about glass ceiling, but it's more like a concrete ceiling. 8% women in the executive committee. You know, sometimes we need slightly stronger measures to encourage, to make sure that this happens. Well, if we do need stronger measures, then you need to go via the legal system and set much stronger rules. Let me give you an example of what we do. At the moment, I'm carrying to the Parliament, in front of the Parliament, a project or a draft project for equality or gender equality between men and women, and it deals with many topics. And so from now on, companies of more than 55 employees who do not abide by their obligations professionally will no longer be able to put a bid forward on public markets, so no longer be able to apply for a bid. or answer a bid. So this is quite a firm measure, quite a strict measure, I think you can say so, but we're basing ourselves on the idea that these duties and obligations, well, in the past 30 years, companies have got used to having to deal with this legal, with this law, and so we have to be very strict on ensuring that it is actually applied. So there are these very sort of concrete measures, but of course we realize in various pieces of research from sociologists, McKinsey, we heard it this morning, on the company culture, the fact that there are companies that are slightly more male-dominated than others, and there are also companies. For example, in a recent study in LVMH, there were 60% women among the. We saw that there were 60% women among the top management. So sometimes gender equality goes the other way. So there's this is slightly negative for men. So there's this company culture that is what it is. But maybe the government would have a role to play. I was talking about training and education earlier on. Maybe we could get them to break these long life stereotypes, and maybe we could, in the end, achieve better results. Well, confirming this BCG research that you mentioned earlier on, it's the same as the figures from the OECD and the European Commission. I think we can all agree on a very simple projection for in the future. If our economies had an employment rate that was equivalent to the rate of men, we would gain 0.5% of growth per year. That's something everyone knows. It's certain. I don't know why people have forgotten or pushing this aside, or it's not noticed. It means several duties and requirements. It means reducing the gap that still exists today in France between the rate of employment of women and men. It's 8%, and it has stopped dropping since the crisis, especially in the more in the poorer areas, neighborhoods. It means putting women back in work. It also means supporting creation of companies from creation by women. It means producing more wealth. So out of these figures, we can absolutely agree with these figures. As far as the rest is concerned, you are absolutely right. Among the elements that explain inequality, lower wages for women or less responsibility for women, you need to take into account the fact that women are not doing the same jobs as men. So that's something that's a fact. Women, unfortunately, are often stuck in certain jobs that are not necessarily as well paid as others, or don't have as much value as others. And there's a figure that's always striking, and I'll share with you here because it's something I didn't used to know. Only 12% of the active population in France, 12% actually carries out a job or works in what we call mixed jobs, where there's 40-60% of different genders. So the standard in France is non-mixity, non-gender equality. And we see this around us. You can see that in engineering schools, 3/4 of the students are boys, almost 80%, that in healthcare or health, 80% of people, of the students or workers are women. So this bears the question. It means a loss of possibility for doing that job for one gender or the other. It means that they're not able to access a whole range of different jobs. So it's less down to the companies than down to public authorities. And of course, it's down to the national education, university education, our policy for schooling. And we've really decided to act on this because actually, as far as national education is concerned, as you know, we've reintroduced the training for teachers, teacher training, which had disappeared recently. In this training for teachers, we fought really to ensure that there is this training for teachers with parity or equality between boys and girls to create between all right early on the same desire, the same competencies and skills, the same interests, because we know that lack of confidence is very much among women, and they have it when they arrive on the workplace. That's for national schooling system. For the schooling system itself, we're creating this national orientation system where we are encouraging professional gender equality, and of course, the school advisors will be judged on their capacity to develop in the so-called male-dominated areas, the number of girls that are actually going down. studying or trying to or deciding to do a job in there. And also throughout the year 2014, I've decided to create the year of gender equality at work with a major campaign. And in this major campaign, we'll be talking about education, school, professional federations. I'd like to involve all of the different areas, especially where there's less gender equality, a certain number of major companies. So I'm really, really relying on this major campaign to really raise awareness, because self-censorship means that girls don't actually go and do certain jobs, and also boys actually decide not to do certain jobs they might want to do. So this self-censorship is down to people themselves, but also down to their families, to their networks, to the society they're in. So to fight this, we need messages that are heard by everyone. Thank you, Minister. So I'm sure that some of you have questions to ask the Minister. And I think there are microphones roaming around the floor. Oh, no questions, sorry. So sorry I just asked that. But I was as clear as crystal, says the Minister. Well, thank you very much, Minister. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to me. And if you would like to read the list, you can buy Challenge, one of our partners, the magazine, and you can find the list in this magazine. Thank you. And I encourage you to stay seated. We're now going to start the Cartier Initiative Awards ceremony. Please don't move. We're going to be starting straight away.